The opioid crisis is so out of control. Lately, the number of people dying of overdoses each year equals the population of a medium-sized city. The synthetic opioid fentanyl, also heroin and prescription painkillers, steals so many lives, the average life expectancy is decreasing for some segments of our population. How did we get here? Where did it begin? Author Barry Meyer traces the origin of America's opioid nightmare back to one drug, OxyContin. 15 years ago, he sounded the alarm with his book Painkiller, describing how the pharmaceutical industry underplayed the addictive nature of this powerful narcotic, setting off a deadly chain reaction.
Well, it's a fabulous book. It's called Painkiller, an Empire of Deceit, and how it began. Barry Meyer, he's publishing this book, and New York Times investigative reporter Barry Meyer is joining us now. Barry, it's so good to see you. This is a great book. Thank you so much for writing it.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson.
Look, tell us about this guy, Sackler. What did he do about this pain thing?
Well, you know, we're in the midst of what is probably the greatest public health crisis of our time. And to really solve it, we need to go back and understand how it started. And it started with this drug, OxyContin. And the Sacklers promoted this drug through their company, Purdue Pharma, as sort of a miracle cure-all. You know, doctors want to treat pain. They want to help their patients. But they were misled and told that this drug, because of its special formulation, could alleviate pain without causing addiction.
Well, this OxyContin, it's a heroin opium derivative, and we used to take morphine. Morphine was sort of good for pain. And why is pain so important? And were they publicizing pain as a health crisis that had to be solved?
Well, pain is our greatest problem. You know, it's mankind's greatest threat. People have suffered from pain forever, and there was a real desire on the part of doctors to treat pain more aggressively, particularly end-of-life pain. You know, there was a time in the United States when people with cancer would suffer. They'd suffer unnecessarily. And so it was a good thing to treat those kinds of people aggressively, to treat their pain. But the idea was promoted that all kinds of pain, be it back pain, arthritis, dental pain, pain from sports injuries, could be treated with these potentially addicting drugs. And to promulgate that idea, Purdue Pharma bombarded doctors with what was essentially fake science.
Well, you said that this Sackler really went on a public relations campaign that did the infomercials and really was in terms of public relations, was groundbreaking, wasn't it?
It was remarkable. OxyContin was promoted more aggressively than any other prescription narcotic in the history of the drug industry. They would have conventions, junkets, where doctors would be brought together and you know, promoted the idea of these drugs. They'd be put on the company's payroll. They'd go out and promote the drug to other doctors. And this drug, which was, you know, in some cases a very effective drug, in other cases a very dangerous drug, was embraced by doctors, and it became a billion-dollar product.
How does all this stuff work? There's a company, I think, called McKesson, and of course this farmer you've been talking about, and others, and there's supposed to be like a pathway down in Florida where they're passing out millions and millions and millions of these pills. Tell us about how this thing works, this pipeline of these supposedly illegal drugs. How are they getting into these fake pharmacies?
Well, what's remarkable to me, Dr. Robinson, is that our government, which claims to be a government of laws, hasn't gone more aggressively after these types of companies. So essentially you have drug producers on one hand and companies like McKesson, which are so-called drug distributors, on the other hand. So they're the middleman, if you will, between the drug company and the drug store. And many of these distributors know that certain drugstores or certain doctors are outlets for drugs getting into the black market. But because the trade is so profitable, they turn a blind eye to it. And unfortunately, our government has turned a blind eye to them. And it's my belief that if some of these corporate executives who have profited widely from this illicit trade, if you will, did some jail time, we'd see far less problems than we do.
You pointed out that Sackler is a great philanthropist, and he's given all kinds of money, but he is a billionaire, was one of the ones in the Forbes list of important executives. Out of this one OxyContin, one drug.
It's remarkable. Approximately $31 billion worth of OxyContin have been sold since the drugs first went on the market in the mid-1990s. The Sackler family are people, you know, I'm sure they're lovely people. If you sat down and had a meal with them or you chatted with them, they'd be extremely reasonable. They give money to the arts, they give money to science, but, you know, they also have not been held to account. We don't know exactly what they knew, and hopefully our government at some point will do the type of investigation to bring the truth of this situation to the public.
How do you tie these prescription drugs, this OxyContin, along with street heroin and cocaine and the other drugs that are illegal?
Well, Dr. Robinson, I think we have a hydra-headed problem. We have the legal drug problem on one side, which are the drugs like OxyContin, and we have the illicit drug problem, drugs like cocaine and heroin, on the other side. And in my mind, I try to keep them separate because I think these problems, while we tend to see them as the opioid problem, have two very different, distinct solutions to them. On the legal drug side, it has to do with the types of drugs or treatments that doctors prescribe. And we need to prescribe fewer opioids and find out other ways to treat pain. The illicit drug problem really is a law enforcement issue, and that has to do with like shutting down gangs, shutting down the ease through which these drugs enter our country.
You've given, I don't want to run out of time, unfortunately, but you've given some really horrible examples, or they're examples of horrible things that have happened, how people's lives have been destroyed, how whole families have been ruined because of these opioids. Could you give us a couple of examples?
Well, you know, it's often a generational problem. It's often a problem where a parent gets addicted to an opioid, and the opioid's out there for their child to get access to. But along with the terrible things that we face, I think we ought to need to focus on like the good things that we can do, the things that we can do that require our compassion and demand our compassion. And that involves the appropriate treatment of people who are addicted to these drugs. They shouldn't be spurned. We need to treat them with the same compassion that we treat people with other kinds of medical problems. And it also, we also need to think about ways that pain can be treated differently, can be treated not with pills. You know, we tend to throw pills at everything as a society, you know, in terms of medical treatment. So both in terms of medical treatment and addiction treatment, we need to kind of focus on thoughtful, compassionate ways to deal with these problems. And I know that people of goodwill and people of faith are prepared to meet those challenges.
CBS did an interesting story about this, that the Congress had actually passed a law that limited the ability of the EPA to actually shut these pill factories down. Is that true, that there are laws that prevent the appropriate law enforcement?
You know, the power of the drug industry and the drug industry's lobbyists to prevent effective law enforcement and even effective medical treatment from taking place is appalling. You know, part of the reason that I reissued Painkiller was because I discovered very recently that the Justice Department actually had wanted to indict the top executives of Purdue Pharma on criminal charges a decade ago. This was back in 2007. The prosecutors that had been investigating this company had found enough evidence of wrongdoing to just, in their minds, justify indicting these executives. And the top executives of the Justice Department, who were being lobbied by lawyers for Purdue, said, no, wait a minute, let's not go there. And that was a tragedy, because had that law enforcement gone forward, we would not be in the predicament we are today.
Barry Meyer, thank you for this. I wish we had more time, but this is a dynamite book, ladies and gentlemen. It's a small book. It's called Painkiller, Barry Meyer's book that's republished. He sounded the alarm years ago, and what's happening now, states like Ohio in a crisis, they're in a crisis, and the damage to people's lives is beyond measure. And we need to have vigorous law enforcement. As he said, these guys have got to go to jail. Something's got to happen to stop this epidemic. Barry, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson.